and get started. Is everyone able to hear me? Awesome. All right. Thank you so much. Welcome to One Click Automated Permissions Removal. My name is Samantha Lisk, and I do want to clarify that it is technically 2 clicks at the behest of my good friend and Salesforce MVP, Amber Boaz, who is also with us and would definitely get on my case if I did not clarify that. Yes, Amber, I'm very sorry for the deception. I apologize profusely. All right. So, just a little bit about me, real quick. I am the incoming business systems analyst at GitHub. I will be starting that role in next week and very excited to be doing that. I started in the Salesforce ecosystem back in 2017 as an accidental admin at a nonprofit. I am located in the Raleigh, North Carolina area of the United States. Since that time, I have worked in a few different roles as administrator, senior admin, or BA in a few different organizations and instances. I am also a trailhead ranger, but don't ask me how many stars I have at this time. I'm not quite used to that new ranking system. I'll get there. And 3 Salesforce certifications, including admin, advanced admin, and platform app developer. I am also an aspiring developer, or devmin, as we like to call it. And if you have a dog, I would love to pet it. You can also find me on uh, currently on Twitter. We'll see how long that lasts, given all of that fun stuff happening over there, and LinkedIn, and at my website. More information on that later on. All right. So, why is it important to remove permissions to begin with? There are a few reasons. One of which is that some managed packages that you might download from App Exchange, for example, uh, when you install one of those packages, it comes with managed package licenses that you can then assign to any user who requires access to that managed package and all of its functionality and components and so forth. When it comes time for that user to leave, however, um, then you, as the admin, will have to manually go into their user record and remove that license from their record so that it can be reassigned to another user. So that new user will then be able to access everything that they need in order to do their new job. This is just a um, inconvenient and time-consuming process. The second reason is that clean org hygiene is a best practice for maintaining high data and metadata. So, for example, we see here we've got an example of a custom label record here. This custom label is referenced by a particular flow in my dev org. We can see that the value used um, in this custom label, in this flow, is a test email address that I created. Just my name, slisktest@gmail.com. The reason that we use a custom label instead of inputting the email address directly into the flow, many of you are probably aware of the reason for this already. That's a practice known as hard coding. If you ever have to update the value to a different email address, for example, if I were a user and this was my company email address and I left the company or transferred to a different department and no longer required Salesforce access, for example, um, if this value were hard coded into the flow, you would have to go into the flow, uh, change the value to the next appropriate email address, and then create an entirely new version of that flow. By using a custom label record or a custom metadata record, for example, you can simply update the value in this custom label or the custom metadata type instead of making that change to the flow and having to create an entirely new flow version and go through the entire potential deployment process of deploying flows, which, if anybody has ever used um, a tool like Capado or Gearset, you may have run into some kind of funky behavior when trying to deploy flows. Or maybe that's just me. In any case, it's a best practice to maintain quality data, and in this case, metadata, by keeping all of these types of items up to date. So, uh, there are, obviously several ways to do this. We discussed a little bit about, doing this manually, which is, you know, by far, while it's absolutely possible, it's really not the best way to go about it in terms of bang for the buck or value for your time as an admin. What we can do is automatically remove all of these items upon deactivation of a user. We can remove the user's permission sets, their perm set licenses and groups, public groups, queues, and managed package licenses with this automation. So you are probably thinking, how does this work? And you can probably answer your own question. It works through Flow. Specifically, there are two flows involved in this process. We've got a parent flow or invoking flow on the left, and a child flow or subflow on the right that is invoked or called by the flow on the left. The parent flow or invoking flow does a few different things. This branch over here is not relevant for our purposes right now, so you can just ignore this branch here. For our purposes, we'll be focusing on this branch right here. What this branch does is it checks to see whether a user has been deactivated. When it finds an inactive user, a newly deactivated user, it then invokes or calls the subflow here on the right. This subflow will then remove, first it will look up and then remove any records that are assigned to the user for permission sets, permission set licenses, managed package licenses, public groups, and queues as well. One thing I do want to note, there is, as you can see, an apex action. And what this does is it looks up or queries the permission set records that are currently assigned to the inactive user. The reason that we have to invoke Apex here is because, to my knowledge, I have not been able to figure out a way to do this. If anybody else has, please feel free to reach out and let me know. To my knowledge, it is not possible currently in a flow or declaratively to perform a nested SOQL query, and that is what this Apex action is doing. Part of the functionality of this Apex action is to run a nested SOQL query, which is a SOQL query inside another SOQL query. And so that's the reason that we do need an Apex. Um, but as you can see, the rest of the elements involved in this flow and the invoking flow here on the left are all declarative. I did create a package containing all of the necessary components for running these flows. These components include both of the flows, the Apex class and test class, and a permission set that needs to be assigned to the running user. You can see here, it's pretty relatively simple. We've got the description, the contents of the package, and installation instructions. If you're interested, you can download the package from this Google site. And if anybody is interested, I can provide that link in the chat, or if you want to reach out to me on Twitter or LinkedIn after the presentation, feel free to do that, and I will be happy to provide the site there at that time. So what we're going to do now is just do a quick demo um, of our automation. So what you can see here is my dev org. We've got my name up in the left hand here, doing some little bit of branding customization. I don't know whether we've got any kind of good place users, excuse me, good place fans in the house. But if we do, you'll recognize the name of our sample user here, Tahani Al Jamil. Right now, Tahani is an active user. She has a custom sales profile and a Salesforce user license. Tahani also has several permission sets currently assigned to her user record. She's also got a permission set group, several permission set licenses, and a one public group and one queue at this time. So all that we're going to do is we're going to go in and deactivate Tahani's user. So this is the one click mentioned in the title. That's really the only one that matters. But technically, to make Amber happy, the second click is obviously we want to make sure and save that change. Make sure we save her deactivation. And we do want to make sure, not for purposes of our automation, but we just want to make sure that if we have any kind of opportunity teams, case teams, and so on, whether we want to remove the user from those teams. Now, I will say that you can see here, it did not automatically just remove them right away. The reason for that is because, let's go back to our flow here. Is because in my dev org, you can see the invoking flow here on the left has a couple of branches, as we mentioned. The first branch here that is not relevant to us in this use case, this one runs asynchronously. Whoops. Apologies there. Let's go back. There we go. Sorry about that. This one runs asynchronously. This branch over here that is checking for inactive users is set to run 1 minute after um, this branch runs. And the reason for that is because we will run into a mixed DML error. And if you're not familiar with those errors, they are basically thrown when you try to do um, a DML transaction on more than one setup object. And a DML transaction means you're inserting a record, you're updating a record, you're deleting records, anything that you can do with data loader, basically. Data loader is a UI for DML transactions, basically. So that's why it will take just a minute for our particular branch to run. But we can go back now and refresh our page and double check if it's been long enough. Just refresh our page here. Take a minute to load. And there we go. As you can see, it's removed all of the permission sets assigned to the user, the groups and licenses, and the public groups and queues as well. So even though it does take a minute to run, it does run eventually, and it is still running much more quickly than it would take an admin to go in and manually um, remove all of those items from the user record. All right, so that is our one-click automated permissions removal. Again, you can find me on Twitter for now at smlisk, or on LinkedIn at slash Samantha Lisk as well. Thank you very much for attending. And if anybody has any questions, feel free to put them in the chat.